to my den. A prophet is one who carries the future. But a prophet is also one that brings life and preservation. The Bible tells us quite clearly that the word of the Lord that came through the prophet, speaking of Moses, preserved Israel. When the word of the Lord comes, there is preservation for you. What you're going to hear in these shows is God's plans for what He's going to do, His next course of events, and possibly where you will be going in life, destiny and purpose. I've traveled all over the world, and as a prophetic voice, I've managed to go to some of the difficult areas in the world where there's conflict, there's war, anger, hatred, and done what a prophet's supposed to do. Not only prophesy and bring the word of the Lord, but also to do good works. And that's what we've done, and that's what I want you to experience as well. It's going to be a beautiful den today. I'm looking forward to breathing with you, because that's what this is all about. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to draw close to Him. The Bible says that Samuel ministered to the Lord in the presence of Eli, the corrupt priest. Sometimes we want perfect environments to minister to the Lord, but Samuel ministered in the presence of a very corrupt priest. What I want you to do today is, whatever your problem is, it doesn't matter what it is, but whatever it is, minister to the Lord even though it is still present. And you watch what will happen to you today. I'm drawing close to you to feel your presence. I'm drawing close to you to touch your face. I'm drawing close to you for your embrace, that I may live by your words, that I may live by your breath. Let's do it today. Feel His presence right now. I'm drawing close to you to feel your presence. Drawing close to you to touch your face. I'm drawing close to you for your embrace, that I may live by your words. I want you to sing it with me. I may live by your breath, because that's what's happening right now. That I may live by your breath, by your words. Sing it together. I'm drawing close to you to touch your face. I'm drawing close to you for your embrace, that I may live by your words, that I may live by your breath. Drawing close. I'm drawing close to you to feel your presence. I'm drawing close to you to touch your face. I'm drawing close to you for your embrace, and I will live by your words. Sing it with me, everyone. By your breath, I will live by your breath.
Till nesilva like it TV silvana Mara hailo honja se Matiel benunel Tu sibie tu video Che non so che albere Deo I will live by your words, and I will live by your breath. Isn't that beautiful just to worship Him with me?
You've always been there. You've always been there for me. Through everything, you've always been there. Yes, you've always been there for me. I feel you always, and you've always been there.
Yes, you have.
You've always been there for me. Through every valley of love, you've always been there.
Yes, you have.
You've always been there for me. I want to thank you, Lord.
You've always been there. Yes, you've always been there for me.
For me. Thank you, thank you. You've always been there
You've always been there.
for me.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Always been there.
You've always
You've
been there.
always been there for me.
Now listen to me. There's been times that I have wondered if you were there with me, but you were there all the time. You know that I wanted it, Lord. I've wondered about your grace. I've wondered about your presence. But after all is said and done, you've been there. You've been there.
You've
Always been there.
yes, you've
Always been there.
for me. You've always been there. Yes, you've always been there for me.
And when it's all said and done, we behold blood that was shed for us. One sacrifice is all that it took to bring life to us. How can we forget you? How can we forget you? Flowing from your hands into my heart. It's flowing from your blood into my veins. It's flowing from your wounds into my soul. It's flowing from your heart into my heart.
Father, we come before you today, understanding this one thing. That, Lord, you gave your only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. Lord, your presence is very evident, and I pray that all over the world many would feel what we're feeling in this den, because this is made for you. We're your living room. We come to you presenting you the bread of life with broken hearts and tender spirits. For if we did not have that, we would be hardened by religion. The sacrifices of God are a broken heart and a contrite spirit. I'm praying today, Lord, that as we gather from all parts of the world, all over the earth, that we would remember that this sacred filling of the soul that is taking place now, because God's Spirit is filling you all over the world. What you're sensing is the Spirit of God that is filling you. Now listen to me. And you listen carefully. You may not be shaking or falling on the ground or screaming in tongues, but the sacred filling of the soul can never be overestimated. The consequences of the sacred filling of the soul can never be overestimated. At this very moment there is light. At this very hour there is power and there is peace. There is love. It is resting upon you and your soul is being restored. Many, many other precious blessings which are inseparable from the Spirit's benign presence. I pray that that light, that celestial light, just that one ray would strike into your darkness and remove it. I pray today, Lord, that that one drop of oil would heal the wounds. And this heavenly rain and dew that we sense would remove barrenness. And that, Lord, the wind that we are sensing would fill us and give us the breath of life.
Have you discovered your purpose and destiny? Do you want to find your God-ordained purpose in this life? With a gift of any amount, we will send you this powerful 2-CD teaching from Kim. With this teaching, we will help you to break the power of negativity and release you into what God purposed for you long before you were born. Discover your purpose and destiny.
I want to speak to you for a few minutes about this because it's important that you understand what it means to suffocate spiritually, to have claustrophobia as a result of divination. Now, I don't like to use that word because the minute you do that, people think you're a little crazy. And they say, well, we don't even know if that works today. Is it some woman on a broom that comes and does that to you? Oddly enough, it's not. You see, a curse was brought onto the human race because of the sin that took place in the garden. But how did that happen? A serpent came into the garden. The serpent did not come into the castle or didn't stand from a mountain and do it. He was right there in the safety of their garden. There's a scripture in Hosea that I quote when I teach on this. And my message is a serpent in the house. And what I teach really is what the scripture says. He's describing the day of the Lord, but it's interesting what he's describing. He says, it's like a man who is running from a lion and overcomes the lion and suddenly is confronted by a bear. He overcomes the bear and gets into the safety of his house, leans his hand against the wall and sighing a relief that he overcame the lion and the bear, and a serpent bites him in his own house. And what he was telling, the story is that sometimes we let our guard down.
because we're in the safety of maybe Christians surrounding us, or we feel in the safety of our house. And so it is spiritually as well. Adam and Eve were in the garden. God was giving them information. He was coming to the garden regularly and communicating with them. And the one thing the enemy wants is for God to stop communicating to you. Because man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out the mouth of God. So what happened was, he came into the garden, and man was, I believe, his clothing was light. There's not such a thing as the nakedness that we know today. The clothing, I believe, was the glory of God. And so when Adam was approached, or Eve was approached by the enemy, at that point, it felt good because he was saying, well, what did God say to you? She recites exactly what God says, adds a little piece to it and says, we shall not touch it. A little bit of exaggeration from the lady there. But so she tells him exactly what she's been told. And he says to her, you will not surely die. Now we know that there was an attraction there for that tree of the knowledge of good and evil, because it was desirable to the eyes. And so the eyes become a real problem, because that's what led her. God, you'll notice in the Bible, God always speaks in terms of ears. Faith comes by hearing, and the hearing by the word. He that has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit is saying. It is the eye that puts you into trouble. Just thought I'd throw that in there. However, in the garden, the fruit was desirable to the eyes and to make one wise. But weren't they becoming wise from God's communication in the garden? I've always said this. From communion comes dominion. So God gives you dominion out of the communion that He has with you. And that's the one thing the enemy wants, is to stop the communication between God and you. Always stop you from praying. Anyway, so we know what happens. They partake of it, and suddenly they know that they are naked. It's not a nakedness without clothes necessarily, but it was the light that I believe was clothing them suddenly disappeared. And when God came into the garden, He was looking for light, because they were filled with light. And he saw no light. It wasn't as if God was blind and couldn't see. And he shouted out these words, where are you? Adam, where are you? Because the light had been removed. His covering was no longer a covering of light. And that's what the enemy does to take away from you, is light. Light comes as a result of God speaking to you. Today, God is speaking to many of you, and He's bringing light to you. The Bible says in Galatians chapter 3 that Jesus redeemed us from the curse of the Lord, because He became a curse for us. And that the blessings of Abraham that might come upon us. That was the curse of the law. And so we see that it was in the safety of the garden that he was able to do this. Divination really is an imitation of the authentic divine expression. In other words, it's not the real thing, but it seems like it. It sounds like it. There are many false ones out there. I've been accused of being a false prophet, which is crazy. But there are truly false ones out there, teachers and prophets, that are leading people astray so they do not have the light of God. And so you've got to know that divination is a spirit that gets close to you by familiarity, so that it can neutralize the very power that you have. And so it comes in the form of a teacher at school, or someone that abused you and did it by enchantment. That's what it really means. The word in the Bible is translated enchantment. Divination is to enchant, which really means to charm, to fascinate, and to capture somebody's attention. And so that's what a spirit does. Very quickly, just to give you an example, I've used the word pythos because that's where it actually originates from, which is the python. Now, you know what a python is? They are constrictors. And I'm going to just read you quickly what they do. They grab their prey with their teeth, and they wrap coils of their body around the prey, and they squeeze it. So what happens is, they have to get close to you to be able to do it. And they don't have good sight, they don't have good hearing, but their little tongue that flickers like that is able to detect the chemicals in the air and the dust. Now you know that dust in type means flesh. So there has to be, if there's a lot of dust, this python is able to get closer to you because of the dust that you're making. So if its prey has caused a stir and there's a lot of dust, it just flickers and senses and gets close to you without having to see well, without having to hear. It gets close to you, wraps itself around, and suffocates the prey to death. Now that's what the spirit of divination does. It's not immediate. It can work through words, enchantment, people saying things, lies that seem like the truth, whatever.
and it comes to you and enters you, and you begin to suffocate. You begin to, in fact, it paralyzes you in the end. How many of you watching me from all over the world have heard what I said, that there's a feeling of paralysis, there's a feeling of claustrophobia. You feel like you're not breathing properly. Well, today you're going to be free from that. 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 4 to 6. This is speaking about Elkanah and his wife, or his wives. One of them is Hannah, which is Hannah, and the other one is Penina, which sounds like some type of Italian food. And she was not a nice lady at all. She was a bit of a cow, let me tell you something, because this girl would tease Hannah because Hannah was barren. And so this girl, his wife, Penina, would be very hurtful towards Hannah because Hannah couldn't have children. And so that's what they would do in those days. So whenever the time came for Elkanah, which was Hannah's husband, to make an offering, he would give portions to Penina, his wife, and to all her sons and daughters. But to Hannah, he would give a double portion, for he loved her even though her womb was closed. So in those days, they believed that the Lord shut the womb tight so that they would punish the woman, and that's why they would tease them or whatever, be ugly to them. And so what he would do is he'd say to her, listen, you are barren, so when you give the offering, you are going to give a double portion. Now you may be saying, well, Kim, are you setting me up to give a double portion? Absolutely not. You will hear yourself. But I guarantee you, if there's some kind of barrenness, whether it's in relationships or business or whatever in your life, I guarantee you that a double portion offering will do something, because her husband knew this. He knew that the time of the offering that God would do something if he gave a double portion. Now, in verse 6, it says, her rival also provoked her severely to make her miserable because the Lord had closed her womb. Now, understand this. That's what they believed. She was cursed, but her husband knew that there was something wrong about this, and that Hannah, his wife, should give birth to a child. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, verse 7, let's read this. So it was year by year when she went to the house of the Lord that she provoked her. Penina provoked her. Therefore she wept and did not eat. Now, let's go to verse 10 and 11. Therefore she was in bitterness of soul. Now, I want to mention a few things about that, because I've been teaching you about the soul. And people that have a bitterness of a soul produce death. Whether it's death in your financial things or your dealings or your relationships or your social life, whatever it is, there's always going to be death. And people wonder, why does everything just go wrong for me? Because there may be a bitterness in the soul which comes about many times by provocation, by a spirit of divination. Remember, Penina, who was the other wife, was constantly provoking her and speaking these words, and as a result of it, she was suffocating and her soul was in great distress. She had bitterness of the soul. And I wrote it down here this morning as being probably one of the most important things to understand, that the soul is going to affect your environment. We've taught you about that. Let me carry on. So, in bitterness of soul, she prayed to the Lord. A lot of people pray as a result of bitterness of the soul. And God will hear you as well. But as we noted with Hagar, that she prayed to the Lord in bitterness and wept, but God said, I'm not listening to your voice, I'm listening to the voice of your son, which is destiny. So Hannah was praying in bitterness of soul and prayed to the Lord and wept. In verse 11, she said, she made a vow. O Lord of hosts, if you'll indeed look upon the affliction of your maidservant, remember me and do not forget me, but you will give your maidservant a male child, I will give him to you all the days of my life. So in other words, what she's saying is, whatever you give to me, I'm going to give it back to you. So she makes a promise to God. Many people make promises, but they never keep them. And they bring curses upon themselves. 1 Samuel 1 verse 18, let's go. She said, let your maidservant find favor in your sight, when she spoke to the high priest. And so the woman went away and ate, and her face was no longer sad. Interesting that the face is affected by the bitterness of the soul. Suddenly she's free. Why is she free? Because she went to the house of the Lord. She spoke to the high priest about it. And he said, you are now blessed. So he puts a blessing upon her. So she goes away and her face is no longer sad. I love it what happens in verse 20. It came to pass in the process of time. Everybody say, in the process of time.
that Hannah conceived and bore a son and called his name Samuel, saying, because I've asked for him from the Lord. And then she said, for this child I prayed, and the Lord has granted me my petition of which I asked him. Are you all ready for that today? Do you believe that God will grant you your petition which you ask him? Because the power of divination can be broken in a second. But what you petition must be brought and laid on the altar so God can look at it and say, I will do what you want because I'm removing the bitterness of your soul so that your face is no longer sad.
Next week on Kim.
God spoke to Job about the hawk, about its keen eye. And so the Lord nudged me and he said, I want you to think about being debt free. And I thought about the hawk. I believe it has to do with investment.
We would like to say a special thank you to our partners for making it possible to broadcast Kim's message of hope to millions across the globe. Your generous support, we are able to place boots on the ground and make a difference for those most in need. We invite you to partner with Kim. Become a vital part of this outreach to the nations and receive the Prophet's Reward. Call toll-free 866-546-4366 or go to kimclement.com/partner.